Hello there. Welcome back to another episode of the scalable multiplayer game design,
Multiplayer
OpenShift,
game design, yes
multiple,
indeed.
multi-scalable, multi-scalar.
All
Mm.
in the ballpark.
Yes, it's been a long time, and many things have
It has.
changed with the Red Hat live streams. And so I I couldn't even find an intro tool video to play. So I apologize that we're just getting in there hard and fast without any warning. But we'll do it live. So whatever. So what are we gonna talk about today, Roddy?
So basically where we left off and I guess where we are now, right? So when we left off, we had a client and a server and they talked to each other and we could do a little bit of small gameplay with a couple of ships bouncing off each other.
Did we even have that
I
much?
don't know. I think
No, yeah, we did with the web
we did.
client.
Yeah, with the web client, right? And then we kind of we looked at our rate of development and we were saying, well, you know, how can we bring in more of a community? And we looked at what I brought on board, which was like an early native C++ client that was like explicitly dependency injected, and it used the C Proton client, and that actually was an update from like an earlier version. Um, and so
Yeah, we
basically, we
updated the
said
base one.
like, hey, this is kind of hard to work with for some people who are used to maybe doing web development or doing C# development. And how could we move this in a way that's more standard, right? So we moved to AMQP because it's an open standard protocol. And a while ago, a few of us had done this thing called Podescape, and we used this open source game development tool called Godot, and we had a really good experience with it. We were
Still
like,
have the
well,
IO site for Pod Escape, or is that just on the Red Hat Arcade?
it's just on the Red Hat Arcade now. The Podescape.io has went
Pod
away.
Escape.
Yeah,
Pod
so that's
Escape.
this one here, right? And so we developed this over the course of a couple of months, and it's
How did you develop it?
we used Godot, and it's a 2D game, and a bunch of us collaborated on it through GitHub. And so we're doing a very similar thing now, where we're doing a 2D game, and we're collaborating it on it through GitHub, except for adding in the multiplayer aspect, and we want to deploy it on OpenShift. Now this one is deployed on OpenShift, but essentially what happens we do. So one of the things that's useful about Godot, for example, is that Godot can do WASM or WebAssembly builds. So for Podescape, we chose to write it in C#, and that uses Mono underneath the hood. And then you compile that to WebAssembly. You take that package of WebAssembly, and you host that in a container image that's running a web server. You take that container image with the web server and our content, and you put it on OpenShift, and you set up your networking appropriately, and here you go. You have Podescape at the Red Hat Arcade, right? So we've kind of done like some of this similarly before, but now we were like, well, what could using these tools bring to us for what we want to do today? And so using this game development environment, we are hoping will allow us to speed up our rate of attracting people because there's a multiple different ways you can use the tool. People are familiar with it. It's established. There's loads of tutorials. Instead of looking at my original, C++ server code and kind of going, I wonder how does this work? Instead, you can put it up in Godot and look at it in the GUI and go, I'm going to poke and click at a bunch of stuff and see what happens. And, obviously, any of us who are programmers can relate to doing stuff, see what happens, repeat and rinse and repeat, right? Until the little
Copying and
light goes
pasting
on.
from Stack Overflow.
Exactly, right? So we're hoping that in using this tool, we can lean on like the whole entity component architecture and bring in our messaging subsystem. And at the end of the day, we'll have a community who understands the tool who might want to participate. And we'll have maybe something we can contribute to the community via our work with messaging in relation to Godot, while at the same time,
or anything else that we do, right? Whether that's
exactly,
Red Hat SSO or
right.
Data Grid or
Like there's a pile of good stuff here where there could be synergy and there isn't yet today. And I think it could be a win-win, even though, you think scalable multiplayer and you might think 3D shooter, and then you might think, oh, well, that has to be written from scratch to be as fast as it needs to be, right? But if you look at the type of
find
game
out.
that we're looking at, well, that's part of it too. But even starting with the type of game we're starting with here, it's a 2D space shooter that's not necessarily Twitch based, and thematically is more like Star
Asteroids.
Control or
Yeah, or Star
Asteroid,
Control. Yeah.
or something where you may have some keyboard control, but when you hit a missile launch, the missile goes off, and it's not like using rocket launchers to propel yourself off the side of a
The
mountain
old
like you might
the
do
Quake
in.
rocket jump.
Yeah, exactly, right. We're not thinking along the same lines, right?
Yeah.
So it gives us a place to start, and who knows, in the future we may get to the point where we've honed everything well enough that we can do a first person shooter. But really, it's not necessarily the focus of what we're trying to do here.
Oh, I just realized this diagram's not correct anymore because it's got the phaser client, which we switched away from.
Right. And so essentially, even though we've switched to Godot and we switched to using C#, one of the interesting things about what we had chosen to do in the beginning was that we chose, so way back when there was a C++ server and there was a C# server in Unity talking JMS over a messaging subsystem.
Oh yeah, that was your like very first prototype,
Yeah,
right?
like way back, right? And then we had a C++ server talking open standard AMQP to a web client in JavaScript, right? And so even though we had a JavaScript client, we had the server still running, and we had the same messaging going on because the messages were defined in protobuf. And today we've evolved again, and one of the things that stayed the same is that the messaging has stayed the same. We're still using AMQP. We still have messages formatted in protocol buffers. So those proto files haven't changed at all. And yet we now have a server in C# on top of Godot, and we have a client in C# on top of Godot using an AMQP.NET client,
Yep.
which is a different client written in C#, but
Right.
still talks industry standard AMQP 1.0, ISO standard 19464, 2014, or whatever it happens to be, and protocol buffers, right? So even though we've had this evolution of tools and technologies,
Oh, now I want to look up the.
we still have the same network communication going on, which I think talks to the flexibility of the messaging subsystem as the piece in the middle that allows communication to take place between a client or many clients, and in this case, a server, or what in the future we hope to be a scale-outable server, so that we can have a fleet of servers which handle a fleet of clients, and we have a messaging subsystem in the middle, right?
Yeah. All right. So with that background, we'll take a look at our server. Well, sorry. Let me close this editor. Don't save. And this is the server. So gotta open the editor. I'm doing all my development on Fedora and using VS Code with C# hooked into the editor. I just followed the tutorial for doing C# with VS Code on the Godot website, and it basically just worked. A little bit of nuance and a couple of gotchas with some of the like, where did I have to get .NET and NuGet and some of these things, but for the most part, it was very trivial. And so the initial thing to do was basically we took that old server code, and I just started like working backwards and reverse engineering it into Godot. And so it was like, all right, well, when the server boots, it needs to talk to the messaging broker. And I was like, all right, well, is there a C# client for AMQP? And sure enough, there is this AMQP framing types, what have you. Let me pull up the CS proj here, because that's actually going to show us. So there is this AMQP NetLight library, which provides AMQP framing and types in AMQP, which allows us to set up connections and do other things. And so basically, when the server first boots, it initializes the connection to the AMQP server, creates a connection factory, and then sets up different queues and targets and senders and receivers for the things that we're doing. And ultimately, it tells it to sort of respond to when commands come in, and so on and so forth. And so that was sort of the step one. I was like, all right, can I even make that work? And sure enough, it did. Oh, I'm gonna have to undo this change if I want this to not explode. Sorry, I was in the process of developing some alternatives to our config file so that we can shove this in containers. But anyway, so pretty simply, the game, oh gosh, where's the process? Nope, nope, ready, okay. So I found some random logging library, which was pretty awesome, which made it easy for us to do logging stuff. And then we load a config file for the logger, and then we start spitting out log messages. We define this message interface, which makes an easy way to like call the functions of sending and receiving and doing things. Load our config file, set up some stuff, and then that's it for the ready. And then in the process, where is process? Do we have an actual process? Come on, process. So process is the normal frame thing that Godot does. And so we have a UI that we're rendering because we're using it for debug purposes, but you could just as easily not render anything for a game server. But effectively, every frame we do this process. And so what do? We find some items in the screen to update them. And then we look for if somebody is sitting at the debug console and pressing buttons to control one of the ships in the game. We do this process player joins, which has to do with when messages come in about players joining or leaving. And then we send updates to all the attached clients. And then this has to do with the debug UI tree kind of thing. And so on the surface, like this is really pretty simple Godot stuff, right? It's all normal scene things, right? So what does process player joins do? So if we dig in here a little bit, oh, come on, you really? That's very bizarre. Why are you doing this? Go to definition. There we go. So there's the C# queue object, and it says basically if the count is bigger than 0, dequeue stuff out of the queue. We're using protobuf, I think Roddy mentioned that earlier, as a binary transport mechanism to send via the messages over AMQP. And unsurprisingly, there is a CS there is a protobuf.net implementation. And so we have all of our protobuf files in .proto format. And then when you use protobuf.net, you can actually compile them into native C# code. And so you get this crazy, insane looking pile of C# that nobody expects you to actually know how to work with, because all you're ever going to do is refer to things in the protobuf. And so in the case of the game server, we have this particular message that was object, this security command buffer that was sitting in this queue, and we instantiate a player. And if we look at what instantiate player does, we have this sector map and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to go through any of the super low level details yet. But for the most part, like this is very simple C# scripting. Like I wrote 99% of this, maybe 90%. I don't know. There's probably a way to ask it and get who wrote all the code. But I'm not a programmer, and I was really struggling, to Roddy's point, with the C++ implementation of the old server, because like none of the interfaces were documented, and it was like wasn't clear what was going on, and there was like internal messaging and external messaging. This stuff is like it's all basically vanilla Godot C# and a little bit of like rudimentary scripting, like, oh, like what do I have to do to interact with arrays in C# or whatever, right? But effectively, and I probably should build a diagram for this. If we look at what happens in the AMQP library, so a command comes in from somewhere, right? So when this receiver receives a command message, it calls this command received function. And if we go to the definition of this command receive function, We accept the message, which tells the broker like, hey, you know, we actually got this. You can delete it or do whatever it is you want to do with it based on your configuration. And then we decode the binary stuff into a command buffer, which is just a type of protobuf. And then we call this process game event within the actual main server scene, if you will. So if we go to the definition of process game event, we have a couple different types of messages. There's security messages, which is when players leave or join. And then there's input messages, which is like the player is shooting or the player is moving. And so we have these different process methods for moving and shooting and for security events. So we'll go to security event first. And so again, this is just a bunch of like very rudimentary scripting, right? Like, oh, if the message type was a join message, in queue a player join, or if it was a leave message, right now we actually don't process leave messages. Nothing happens to the player. So there's probably be a to-do there. Buffer this because it collides with sending game updates. I think actually this is fixed by this in queue, this to-do statement.
Yeah, I think
Anyway.
that's probably the case.
And then we've got the process move command. So if we go to the definition of move, again, it decodes the binary stuff. And then it figures out like, okay, which player are we actually moving based on the UUID that was attached to the message. We calculate what buttons they were pressing. So the game client has to tell us like what their X movement is and what their Y movement is. This is basically true false. We're doing very hacky, simple space movement. And then we put a movement item, which is just this thrust vector, into the queue for this particular player. So if we look at this, definitely don't need to know about the queue function. Where's the definition of this movement queue? And so here we've got this movement queue, which is a C# queue. And if we look at where it actually gets used, we come down here. In the physics process for the player scene, again, this is like all vanilla Godot stuff. This is not a how to use Godot stream. This is more of a what we did with Godot stream. But hey, look, this explains kind of a little bit how we did our physics, air quotes physics. It's not really physics. It's basically like hacky asteroid-ish movement. So what do? We figure out where the ship is. We find all these labels that we want to update, which is related to the debug mode of the server. We update the labels, and then basically we say, hey, if there's anything in the queue for movement, let's go ahead and process it. So if the movement was in the Y direction, we lerp their velocity. If the movement was in the X direction, we do something else. And then basically we do the Godot's move and collide function based on which way they're moving. And then we clamp them inside of like this big spherical, circular star field or whatever. So let's actually get into like watching the debuggy thing and see what we can see. So one of the key prerequisites is we actually need the message broker to be running somewhere. And so I'm basically just running the Artemis broker from upstream. I downloaded the zip file and then did a couple things to get it to run. And so this sets up a broker with all the basics. But as you can see, AMQP.
Yeah, and out of the box, even if you didn't do anything, if you just ran it, after unzipping it, it created a broker and then ran it, you'd get an AMQP acceptor open on your local machine. So if you're doing local development, like grab the zip, unzip it, even before touching containers, and you'd be good to go.
Yeah, so download Apache Artemis, and I'm just using Apache Artemis from the zip file. But we've got it set up so that it does listen for AMQP. 5672 is the default port. I am not using ngrok right now, so let's go to the server here and look at I gotta change the config file name because, oops, I rebooted my computer, so I have to do ctl Oh gosh. So for whatever reason, I have a Keychron Bluetooth keyboard, and the function keys, like they don't work right because there's some weird Mac Linux USB, I don't even know. So I literally have like a systemd script that makes the function keys work. Because otherwise they just want to, like, they're stuck in alternate mode. So like if I want to use F5 to refresh the browser, it tries to make the screen brightness change. So I got to fix it. Anyway, what did I say I needed to do? Oh, rename the config file. Let's see. So I think this will actually build and run. Okay. So let's actually look at the config file. Localhost 5672. That's correct. We've got a couple of other things for the game itself, like these are kind of sensible defaults, if you will. And then within VS Code, I'm gonna play in the editor, and when I do this, it's gonna build the C#, and you'll notice that we get a bunch of errors. These are actually, oops, I thought we got a bunch of errors. Yeah, so we get all these weird errors. This is apparently normal output based on the way the protobuf.net compiler generates C#. Like, even though it says errors, they still work. But anyway, so what we've got here is a bunch of debug output from the game server. So it loaded the logging configuration, it initialized the AMQP connection, configured itself, and says, hey, I've finished initializing the AMQP connection. So if I switch to this thing, you can see this is the game server debug console running. And so this is an area that shows like a list of the players that are known to the game. And then we can just create a player ID and hit the join button. And then we get an actual player object happening. If I switch to the here, you'll see that we added a player instance. Like here's the, when I pressed the join button, we logged that we were sending a message. And then the server was like, oh, I got a join message for this ABC player. And then later the server's like, cool, I'm adding an instance of this player somewhere. Okay, cool. And so this is a player instance, and it's accepting keyboard input, if you will. So I can turn them left and right. I can increase their velocity. I can decrease their velocity down to 0. And I think control is fire. Boom. So there's the space missile. Off it goes.
Yeah, one thing to notice, the camera in the server there is locked to center on the ship. So
yes, very true.
Even though it's always in the center, it is actually really moving, relatively speaking.
Yeah. So if I join another player, we'll get this BDE player over here, and you can see the screen switched. And if I click in the debug on ABC, it'll zoom me back in. And I did add some zoomy stuff. And if you look at the code repo, which is under Red Hat Game Dev in the server, right? SRT Godot server in the Red Hat Game Dev organization. I try, wherever I copied and pasted from Stack Overflow, I tried to link to the original example that I had found. So if we look for the zoom, you know what? I did not link to the tutorial that I used for the zoom. Now I feel bad. I'm gonna have to find whatever the zoom was.
Find it and do it later.
Huh?
Put in it to do.
Yeah, put in it to do. Okay, so back to the server. So I've got another player, and if I move this player, we'll see that they get close. That was weird. I don't know what just happened. Oh God. Oh, I see what happened. Oh no. I've seriously broken the game. I guess I never tried. Well, no. So what's happening is when I press the down button, it's capturing the down button in the in the UI selector.
Yeah.
And it's not actually doing the right thing. So I'll have to figure out how to fix that and make this guy not capture keyboard input. Yeah. But anyway, and so if I shoot and the missile hits the other player, oh, really?
Oh, so close.
So close yet so far. This game is fun already. Like I haven't even. It's oh man, you know what this reminds me of, Roddy? It reminds me of QWOP. Do
Oh, I think
you?
I do remember QWOP.
Yeah. So QWOP. So for those of you who aren't familiar with QWOP, I'll pull it up on Wikipedia. So it was a game where you had to make somebody run,
Oh, that was really hard.
but it used the Q, W, O, and P keys on the keyboard,
And map them
but
to
and
appendages.
map them to like the muscles of the runner, but like it did not make sense and it was nearly impossible and just maddeningly frustrating, right? And so it's funny, like it's not this even remotely, but yeah, just like that minor miss felt very quappy in nature. So anyway, so this player shot, the space missile hit the other player. You can see the hit points went down to 75. If I shoot again, they go
There
down
you go,
again,
50.
and so on and so forth. I don't have a way to actually remove players right now because very early hacky build stuff going on here, but cool. All right, so I'm going to minimize this, and then what I'm going to do is switch to the game client, and it is entirely possible that this will explode, but the game client is basically just the game server in reverse right now. So it and it's also a more well organized repository. uh, Thanks, Riggin, man. We appreciate your support. So we still have this server connection thing, which is doing the AMQP. It's got a little bit more robust error handling and explosion of on failure kind of things if it doesn't work out right. So if I look at the client config, let's see. So this is localhost 5672. And if why are you showing me this? Oh, right, yeah, I fixed. Oh, you know what? I think I had to fix the fonts, Roddy. I don't know if that got uploaded. Anyway, whatever. So if I launch this game client, it's going to do a build. I think it's going to try to do a build. We get the same errors from the protobuf AMQP library thing. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. And then eventually it pops up the game client. Hooray! And so thanks to Khalik Ray on our team, he made these cool graphics for the space rings things. What is the call sign of the captain? We'll just call it captain. And then we'll hit the join game button and hopefully something will happen. Oh, I can't
You
click with
gotta
the mouse. I
use the
have to
keyboard.
tab and then space. Yes. Yeah. And it's broken. I think, Roddy, this is the problem that you had fixed.
Yes, with the UUID versus the player name being used as the identity
Yeah,
of the
okay.
player.
But
Yeah, I
if I
didn't know if that made
go
it into the
back
repo or not.
to the game server, we see that there's this new player captain, and they're off in their own sector way far away because that's how we implemented the game. We only allow 2 players in a sector to start. And so there's this whole hex
Yeah, but quick,
blob based thing going on.
do you
That
have
I
that
can.
those diagrams, that little presentation thingy you drew
Oh
explaining
yeah,
all
yeah,
this
yeah,
work?
yeah, yeah.
That was really a good visual to explain what the end goal is and why that behavior occurs.
That's in my personal. Hold
Can
on,
you
I'm gonna
get
have
to
to
it
open.
safely?
Yeah, can I get to it safely? I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. My computer might explode, but I'm pretty sure that I can get to it. SRT. So for those of you who are familiar with old hex-based games, or like tile games, if you remember even before hexes, when Civ was like square tiles. Roddy, can you still hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, yes.
Because my computer is in full meltdown mode. My load average now 15, 16.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of, I think.
Yeah, hold on. Let me do this. Close to Windows. Work. Yeah, baby. Okay. So I made this presentation that sort of describes how we're doing hex stuff. Oh, and before I do this, this is definitely
Red Blob Games. Red Blob
yeah.
Games? Yeah. That's definitely the go-to place for hex tiling.
So this Red Blob Games hexagonal grids, like holy crap. Thank you so much, sir, for putting this out
Absolutely.
there because it is amazing. So it goes into excruciating detail on how hexes work and hex
And it has
work.
little active demos like built into
Yeah, and
the
like
web page.
JavaScript, like stuff, and
Yeah,
hex
really great
math,
stuff.
and all these other things. And so anyway, so this is super cool, right? Like absolutely no questions asked. Like amazing that this exists. But then, even better, there is this guide to implementing your own library with C# implementation. Where is it? There's the C#. I could have sworn I pulled it from this site. Where? Ah, here we go. Code from this page in C#. Here is a C# file with all of the hex code. So this is again copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. I wrote next to nothing. I think I made like extraordinarily minor name or label changes in this file. But basically I just aped this file right off the thing. So we're doing hex stuff, but we're doing it in a little different way. The ships don't, like, they just travel through space. But what we did was we said, okay, there's going to be this like play area with hexes inside of it. And the hex will be used to determine where players get instantiated. So now we're getting into sort of game design. Cloudabide, I'm not sure. Oh, scale up my workstations. I will do my best to make my fonts bigger. I apologize. So from a hex perspective, we're using the hex to locate where players are going to get instantiated. So when the first two players start the game, there's this sphere. Well, technically it's a circle. And that's the clamped play area that I was referring to earlier. And then we'll dump the first two players in here. And then when more players come in, we use the Red Blob Games tutorial for, oh gosh, of course it's the wrong browser window. Oh, it's this browser window. That's annoying. Sorry. Oh, you'd think I'd streamed once before in my life. Implementation of hex grid. Rotation notes map fractional. Where was the? Sorry, now I need to figure out which one it was that I used. There's a very specific thing. I think it was navigation. Still with me, Roddy?
Yeah, and so like while you're looking for that there, one of the things that this leads to like a little further down the line is like area of interest calculation. So one of our goals of the design is to be able to scale this out across a larger OpenShift cluster by spawning pods of new game servers, which will then dynamically balance the load of the players as they're playing, right? And so in order to do that, having this tile layout and all these calculations up front will further down the line allow us to hopefully use some algorithms that are already known for area of interest that people have developed over years for massively multiplayer games, so that we can subdivide these sections among different, numbers of instances of the server, and so that we can scale these out evenly. At least that's the plan, and that's the experimental design goal that we're going for.
When you run out of CPU, scale up your systems. Oh, yeah, that's very true. You could vertically scale, but it's hard to do that while players are playing because usually that involves taking down a server. But yes, the goal here, it brings up a good point and maybe something to refresh what we're talking about. The goal here is essentially we want to be able to horizontally scale because, theoretically that's easy, right? Especially in the cloud. And with a container platform like OpenShift, it's could be made to be automatic. Even the difficult part, to Roddy's point, is like figuring out the logic of transferring the area of interest that a server is maintaining, and that state to another one, but that brings up like we were planning on using some kind of data grid or data cache for stateful information, blah, blah. Anyway, so once I had gotten to where's that slide presentation? Once I had gotten to this, and I was like, okay, cool. Ignore the hex for a second. Like, I've got 2 players. Okay, where do I put the 3rd player? So the first thing I did was like horrible, like random, sort of like literal random number generation to plot players, which immediately gets to be terrible. And then I was like, all right, how can we more meaningfully distribute players? And so then I was like looking up like distribution stuff, and then I ended up finding like Poisson distribution, like in C# to like try and like figure out how to place things. And I was just like, this is awful, and it's not necessarily going to always give you like 2 players kind of in a reasonable space. And I don't remember how I ended up accidentally finding or stumbling onto the idea of using hexes, but I was like, okay, well, we've got this concept of rings for the game as like a game design element. How can we distribute players in there? And I was like, all right, well, we want to distribute players around these rings. Somehow hexes, I was like, well, what if we just like traversed around the ring and just dumped 2 players in each of these things, and we'll call them sectors, because we had conceptually this idea of sectors that we had talked about. And so basically between all the streams we had done and all the BS like back and forth and all these other things, I was like, well, what if we like put sectors around the ring and they just keep growing out or whatever? And so then I stumbled upon this idea of, okay, so we've got these hexes, and the first one is the center hex in a ring. And then once you get more players, you do this like ring traversal is something on a ring, but you kind of like turn your head sideways and do it as like, well, let me just traverse the ring. And if there's not players in that sector, in that hex, it's actually this one, traversing the rings one by running a spiral pattern. We're doing this. So you go here and it's like, okay, well, there's 2 players here. Well, let me get bigger. Okay, there's nobody here. I'll put 2 players. Hey, there's 2 players here. Okay, let me put them here. And we sort of traverse around. So what I settled on was, okay, we'll start here. We'll put 2 more players in. And then the new pair will end up in this next ring. But we like kind of shift the center of the sphere to keep like them from just flying completely apart from one another. This is like in Street Fighter or Star Control, where there's sort of a big play area, but there's a defined boundary that you can't go outside. And maybe we'll get to a point where if you try to go outside, it gets destroyed. I don't know, whatever. But the point is, the next 2 players go into a sector on the ring, and then the new pair gets deposited into the next sector on the ring, and so on and so forth. And so later, you get a 3rd pair without piling. And then like much later into the game, you can have a situation where players have moved around and ended up in other sectors. And so in this case, like this one sector is actually empty. So if we had a player join in this game state, we would start in the center. And I know it doesn't look centered because of the way the ring has grown, but trust me, this is the center one with just the play area clamped off to the side. You would go, oh, there's 2 players here. I can't go in 0. All right, let me go to 1. Hey, there's nobody here. This is where I'll put the player, even though we've got these other players here. I think that's okay. And then sort of really late in the game, you've got sort of players randomly distributed because they've moved around. And so you would start in the center and you would say, oh, hey, we've got this. No, there's only 1 player here. We could put the first player here. And then you'd sort of traverse around and be like, oh, okay, now we can put a player here. So now if we go to actual sort of code land, server, Godot server, and we dig into the server code, I legitimately, I swear to you, I had a piece of paper and a pencil, and I was doing, okay, so here you go, traverse sectors based on the function from Red Blob Games. I had to take this pseudocode and some of the other like implementation functions and like loosely translate them to C#. And then I was sitting there with a pen and paper, like doing the math to make sure that it worked. Cause it just, I couldn't believe that it worked. And then I actually was having some problems where I had implemented it badly, and I don't remember what it was. It was like I was missing a less than, and I had less than equals instead of less than or something. And it was like
It's usually
totally
something
behaving
small.
badly. Huh?
It's usually something small
Oh,
when
it
you're
was something
doing
tiny, and it
examples,
was
right?
behaving really badly. But basically, after a bunch of writing things with pencil and paper and figuring out that no, this stuff really works, we got to this code. So essentially, I'm actually gonna try to walk you through this a little bit more explicitly. So we process the player joins, then we instantiate a player. And so when we go to instantiate player, we update the sector map. And so this says, update the map in preparation for traversing the ring. So basically, every time a player joins, we nuke our picture or our view of the sector map, which is just an array. Well, sorry, it's a dictionary of sectors and how many players are in them. And so we basically go across each of the players that we know about, and then we calculate using a function from RedBlob what sector that player is in based on their XY coordinates. And then we say, okay, if the sector map contains an entry for that sector, add 1 to it. And if it doesn't, then this is the first time we've seen it. So just make it 1. And so basically, we iterate over all the players and we build the sector map of all the players that we know about, which tells us how many players are in each sector. And so then we go, all right, we start with the center. We instantiate this new player object and we set their values. This is just like basic initialization stuff. We add this particular player into the known list of player objects. And then now we start traversing the ring to find out where we're actually going to put this player. So if we have more than 2 players, that means we need to be doing ring stuff. So we're outside of that first initial central sector. If the current known radius is 0, we have to make it bigger than 1 or bigger than 0. We got to make it bigger. It's possible that for somehow we ended up with no players in sector 0, like late game. So let's check if it has enough players just for funsies. If it does have less than 2 players, we actually don't have to do anything because we default to the current sector being 0. I realize that's probably bad, weird code, but whatever. Otherwise, if we're not doing something with sector 0 and we have a ring radius, then we actually start to do our traversal. And that traversal will tell us what sector we're actually going to dump a player into. So if we look at this traverse sectors, this is the red blob stuff. So we iterate with the I's and the J's. And basically, we do something dumb. We say, okay, we look at every single sector that we know of and look up how many players it is. If it has less than 2 players, then we return that as the one that we want. Otherwise, we go to the neighbor and then whatever, and then I forget what this one does. Oh, and then if somehow we got to the very end of it, we make the ring. If we got through all the known sectors in all the known rings, we make the ring radius bigger, and then we go to the next sector on that ring, and we say that's the one that we're going to put the player into. So we've traversed everybody, and we set the new star field radius to the current size of a sector, which for simplicity, we're just using 1,000 pixels, which I know is weird. Like at some point, we'll have to do some sort of real world, air quotes, real world math to decide like what, how big is a ship and how big is a reasonable size for a sector and so on and so forth. We set the center to, we look for the center in pixels of the sector that we want to put the player in, and then we badly randomize the start position within that sector. And then we take the new player that we were instantiating and we set their X and Y coordinates to be this badly randomized thing. And then we actually finally add them to the scene. This is Godot stuff. And then we tell all the other game clients that a player has joined, right? So this is a specific type of game buffer, which is a game event, which is the create buffer. Let me pass that in. I apparently have a chat window open somewhere that I need to close. There we go.
Yeah, and it was interesting earlier, like when you ran the client and we saw that there was like that little pocket of 2 ships, and then further away, there was that 1 ship, right? And we can see basically that this is this hex tiling in action, right?
Yep. And so now if I add Brad and join Brad, badly randomized, Brad is like legit on top of Cap'n. But you can see their sector, right? -1, 1, 0, -1, 1, 0. If I click on ABC, this is sector 0, right? And so now if I add Susan, Susan is in 0, 1, -1. If I zoom out, we can see Brad and Captain over here. And then if I zoom, I can't zoom out any further, but we would see ABC and BDE kind of up in this neck of the woods, right? So this is the sector stuff in action. If I add Jeff, not particularly random. So got to work on the random function, but you know, at least we get 2 players in a sector whenever we join players. So let's go back. I'm gonna kill the server and I'm gonna kill the client. Did we PR that change to the server?
I don't
Or sorry, to
recall.
the client, the one that you made, or did you just point
If
out in the code?
I think I just pointed it out. I had to change here locally.
Can
I
you
don't know if it got
PR it?
updated. I can take a look and see if I can find it here. Yeah.
So I'll look in the code where it actually got changed. So I think it was in the server connection where.
And there was a comment that kind of pointed out that it wasn't using the UUID and it was switching to use the player name, right?
Let's see. No.
Although I think it must have been in there though, because if not, you wouldn't have gotten all the different players in.
Well, the I didn't try to move them, which is what caused the explosion.
Oh, that's right.
But because the UUID is different, the client was drawing what it knew about,
Yes.
but it didn't know about it. Yeah, anyway, the client didn't know what to draw in the right way. I'm pretty sure that when you change that, it fixes the client. So where? No, it's in the play. It's in the game where we actually join, where we send a join message. So now we're doing, yeah, join game as player, sending join with UUID. I think, so this is commented out.
Yeah, so that should not be the player name. That should be the server connection.UUID. And the thing is that that's a little bit misleading in that the UUID that's there is not the UUID of the server connection, but is the UUID of the current player stored in the server connection object, which is why when you put it back to make it work, it looks odd. It's a structural deficiency.
Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into why that is because I don't even understand it right now, but whatever. We'll give it a try and see if it works.
But that was definitely the change.
So what?
That was definitely the change.
Okay, so this is the server. Let's restart the server. Okay, that is running. Okay, cool. And then we want to restart the client. Can't tell how many people are watching right now. 5 people are watching. Wow. Thanks, 5 people for watching. definitely ask questions if you have questions. This is like a combination of hackish Godot stuff, C#, and game design. All right, CAPN. Fine. Why? Why are we not visible? Doesn't know what sector we're in. It doesn't know where we are. We're definitely connected to the server. You know, I'm gonna, just for giggles, I'm gonna try killing the server and restarting it. Or the broker. There's a lot of like garbage cleanup-y stuff that we probably need to be doing that we're not doing right now. All right, start the server. Well, I could have sworn. Can you check the public repo, Roddy, and see if the change is in there?
Yep.
Actually, I suppose I could just do that myself.
Yeah, I'll just pop it up here.
Git remote, git pull origin main. Oh, definitely there's changes.
Yeah, add Kubernetes.
Let's see.
That's not the right one.
Discard changes to client config, discard changes to game.cs, git pull origin main. Whoa, yeah, okay. Lots of things have changed recently. So that could definitely be what's going on. Okay, localhost. All right. Game.cs. Ship instance UUID equals UUID. Create ship for UUID. Okay, whatever. Let's see if it works. So we got a server with nothing. We've got one consumer, one connection, waiting for the game to finish building and come up. Unless it exploded. Nope, still building. Okay, game engine. Here we go. What's the call sign of the captain? We see another connection happened, right? So the client has joined. So if we do captain and we join the game, fingers crossed. Bummer. Well, we got the player.
But the client didn't draw it.
Yeah, but the client's still not drawing it. Why is that? Debug console. Create ship. Sending join. Trying to log in as captain. Sending join. Create ship for UUID. So it created a ship. Check if it's my ship. Where objects add. Turn ship instance.
Yeah, I just checked the history to be sure that was the right change, and that was the right change at the time. So there could be something else going on in that case.
Could be something that I broke. So let's add some more. Yeah, so now we're getting into live coding here. So let's add some more logging. Join game. So it's send the join, which it did fine because we saw the player on the other side. Create ship for UUID. What actually calls you? This is in main scene. Game 109. Whoa, lots of things happening on my phone right now. called when the network process game membership event. Okay, update ship with the UID. Try get value. Doesn't exist. So see, it didn't actually send this message though. This doesn't exist message in the logs. So something's still funky.
So the ship does exist.
So here's what I don't understand. This log message happened. Create ship for UUID with the UUID.
Yep.
But the thing that calls this function
doesn't appear to have been called.
Is this create ship for UUID, which right before it has an update message. Unless there's another place that it gets called. Nope. I don't understand how that happens. Sending join, which it did. Did that right. Oh, let's add more debug.
Yeah, and I see a message here from Jason Tudash that he says that the quickest fix was to just pass the actual UUID and hold the player name as local only for now. Patched and pushed to GitHub. Did a quick test with a couple of Godot clients and it looks to work. And he shows a screenshot where indeed we see what we do not hear today, that there are multiple ships up and moving around on two different clients.
So this instantiates a ship instance, player objects, try get value, UUID. That's the UUID that gets passed in. Out? I don't know what out means. See, somebody's getting fancy with their C# skills, and I don't know what that even does.
Out is a parameter that comes out of a function. So basically, somebody hands something in, you stick something in it, and then when it comes out of that function call, it has a value that you want to retrieve. Yeah, and looking at the number of changes to the client from the repo on main, after that fix went in,
Airship
the only thing added was screen artwork. So if there's a change, it could be local.
Oh, okay. The reason that we didn't see this message is because the player does exist because it was created when we created it. If that makes any sense.
Because it was this client and not a different client, right?
Yeah. So during the join, we do that? Like reading somebody else's code.
It doesn't take very long.
Input, update, create ship, join game as player. Yeah, so when you press when the join button is released, it tries to log in. What? It doesn't even say that either. Oh yeah, login screen. Trying to log in as captain. Full equals success. Join game as player. Okay, so this is where we join the game as the player. So it builds the command buffer and sends it. Return true. To do this always can't be true. Yeah, so it sends the join message and then sets the label to our player name. And so it's always successful. Remove myself, queue free. Weird. I don't know why it does that. Yeah, so this is where I'm confused because update ship of the process input event. Where's the server connection? Update from game event buffer. Yeah, that's going to be. Okay, here's where it happens. Yeah, so we get the create as a message that comes in, right? Entity game event buffer create. So that calls the new ship create ship for UUID. So we do that and add the player objects. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change. I'm going to, okay, first I'm going to kill the server. Then I'm going to kill this editor. I actually don't think I had to do that. And then I'm going to start the editor VS Code attached to the client. Come on. There we go. Okay, then I'm going to restart the broker.
The zooming stuff you added in, was that recent?
No.
Okay. I was just wondering if maybe the player exists on the client, we just can't see it. Maybe it's elsewhere except for where we're at.
I don't think the Zoom has, I don't think there is Zoom in the client.
Okay.
The player does exist on the server. It's just
That's
for
right.
some reason the client's not drawing
Right, exactly.
the relevant information. So I'm going to add some debuggy bits. All right, so there's the server. Here's the client. I'm going to play this in the editor, which will give me the remote stuff for variables and all that fun jazz. Where's the editor? Here's the editor. Remote. Thinking. Okay, game. Map canvas layer, login screen. All right. So when I join the game now, let me actually do this process move command. This is the server. I want the client. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Yeah, so updates. What does this update do? It says update the ship with the UID, update from, okay. So if we look here, definition, update from again, the position equals the position, X and Y, the angle, the velocity. Okay, so this should draw the thing for the player, right? When we get an update. So maybe something's not working with the update. Oh, aha. Okay, hold on. Let's think about this. Okay, so here's the message. So when we get an update message, update from game event buffer. Yeah, so this is probably going to barf out a ridiculous quantity of messages, but just for giggles, I'm going to do it. I have a sneaking suspicion this is more UUID mismatch stuff. I need to figure out a way to like only spit this out like every once in a while, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you need like a sampling logger.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure there's a way to be like mod, like, you know, I'm sure Godot has some variable, and for those who are actually watching and actually know something about Godot, I'm sure Godot has some variable for like the current frame or how long it's been running that we could like divide by,
Yes.
you know, 30 to only do it once every other second or something. All right, so if I do this, I have to stop it and then restart it. I have a sneaking suspicion that we're getting updates for a UID that we're not trying to draw or something like that. So let's go here to the editor, go back to remote, and then go here and then join as Cap'n. And so we're getting updates for FB whatever. And so now if we look here, is this the ship? The ship doesn't even exist. It doesn't appear to have created the ship. And player objects is not currently a public, it's not exported, I don't think. Here's the game. Yeah, the player object's not exported. So if I break in here, actually I'm going to break inside the game itself, because what are we doing? We're calling that update function. So here's server connection. We're calling ship update from event buffer egeb, but did we actually find a ship? Ah, see, oh wait, no, step into, step over. Yeah, step over. So it found a ship.
So the client does know about a ship.
Can I access
Just
the
not
player
drawing it for
objects
some other
from in
reason.
here? I'm in server connection. I don't think I can access player objects. Oh, but I have the game, don't I? What line of code am I on? I do have a game. So if I come into the debug console, game, I do have a game. Player objects. Player objects. FB5. B1072. Where's the FB5 B107? So like here's the, yeah, so it's the right
Same.
player.
Yep.
Let's see. So what do we do here? Where is it? Oh no, that server connection. So ship update from event buffer egeb. Here's the egeb. It is a 2D body update player. Body velocity forces here. Position. It's negative 348 and 41. Okay. I wonder if it's just getting drawn off screen.
It could be, yeah.
So update from game event buffer. So that's a particular player ship. No, because look, if we go back to the remote, right? We don't have any
It's not in the
player
list.
scenes. It never instantiated a
The
player
player.
scene. Where's that?
So why didn't it instantiate the player if it knows about the player?
Right. So let's trace backwards through that. So let me get rid of this.
So did I see earlier on a different note that you had containerized the output of the client?
I containerized the server.
Oh, you containerized the server. Okay. So maybe, because we have a little while left, maybe we should talk about that too.
Sure, we can talk about that. So now we're gonna switch to talking about containerizing Godot in a server. So if we come over here, Godot.
Because like that speaks to our goal of getting it up on OpenShift and scaling it across.
Yeah.
Right.
So Godot server in Kubernetes, I found this repo and I found this Docker file or container file. And so this makes use of chained build stuff in OCI. And so effectively there's a build container where they run the Godot CI image, and then they just run the Godot editor headless, and you feed it an export preset and tell it where to spit out the export and blah, blah, blah. So I started with this and I was like, hey, great, let's run it. And it immediately exploded. And the reason that it immediately exploded has nothing to do with this guy having done anything wrong. It has to do with the fact that Godot community has made the mono stuff look very different, and you'll appreciate this momentarily when I show you. And so when we pull up the container file for this, so instead of the version being like .m or dash mono, it's backwards. It's mono dash
Oh, that's weird.
for the CI image.
That's
So that's the first problem. And the second problem is that from a zip file path perspective, they have mono namespaced into a folder instead of just being the name. And then the name is all butchered too. So basically, like, I had to hack mono support into this container file, which really wasn't that bad. The other thing is that the way the original container file was built, the Linux server zip file that the Godot community puts out has a single file in it. And so they were using funzip and pipes and other stuff. The issue with, or I shouldn't say the issue, when you're dealing with mono, there's a bunch of like mono support content that's in there as well, like native stuff that comes with the zip file that had to get captured and moved around. So effectively, I had to massage this container file a bunch to do a few things. So first, I had to pull the correct mono version image. The export was pretty much not an issue. This stayed the same. So then you download via wget the mono Linux server, which is headless and has none of the editor stuff. It's pretty slim. But then I like moved it from its complete big file name into a folder, and then I had to move the binary, which has the same name as the folder name, into another file. Like, I didn't have to do this, but I did, just to make it a little cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to massage the copy a little bit. So I needed the entire Godot server folder because of the mono dependency folders, the data folders that come in. Then I needed the whole export folder, because when you build with C# mono, you get another data folder that has your like C# dependency stuff in it. And then I had to include our log. I didn't have to include our logger config, but I chose to include the logger config in the repo. And then lastly, it works. So now that I actually have a server, if I run this Artemis, come on. So,
Different history. Oh.
So I built the container file using the normal syntax, right? And so now podman images, I have this Red Hat Game Dev server.
That's not too big.
Right, 159
megabytes.
megs. Yeah, I didn't even look. That's
pretty
actually
good.
really small. So if I run the container, it should. Oops. Oh, boogers.
Yeah, like you see the Mono 344 one there is pretty big itself, though. But the game
Right,
itself
because
is
that
very
was
thin down.
the
That's the builder, right?
that's the full Godot everything with the editor in a container, all the depths, like probably like the .NET client, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like it's a giant pile of
it's
stuff, but it's
bulky.
only used for build, right? So if you're
Yep,
talking about distribution via container to scale servers, like 159 megs, like that's teeny
that's
tiny,
pretty good.
right? So if I run this, it should run, and it did. It's initializing the AMQP connection, but it doesn't appear. Oh, got it. Okay, I know what the issue is. So this is where we're going to get temporarily stuck. So inside the container, it's trying to connect to localhost by
Yeah,
default.
that's not going to
But
work.
the way that Podman handles networking, localhost inside the container is in a network namespace dedicated to the container.
Right,
So I
so that you
actually have
can
to
port.
tell it to use. I would actually have to tell it to use like. Where's the Podman network? Well, I can tell Podman about IPs and stuff, but I'd probably have to use like the IP address of my laptop to make it be able to connect to Artemis. The weird thing that I couldn't figure out is like it never seems to explode on not being able to connect, but I don't think the server has that. I think maybe only the client has that. I can't remember. But either way, it it's not going to work. So what I had started to do from a code perspective on the server side was I had started to dig into um, the load config function, and this is where I was like, I was going to check if we were able to load the file, and then if we couldn't load the file, we would check for the environment variables, and then that's when I started to like dig into, trying to be cute with like the coalesce operator. Like if the value is null, then use the default or whatever. But like you, null is not a valid for an int, and so like once you int parse like the getting of the variable, you don't know that
Right.
it's null, and so like this
That's what
this
you're
is
doing
where
at the very beginning that we commented out so we could move on and
yeah, right.
yeah,
So this is another sort of roadblock here. But what I could probably do for giggles is force I could temporarily hard code the URL
yeah, the
to
IP,
be I
your
think if
local
we
machine's IP.
yeah um,
Which was
oh, that's probably not,
1.236.
it's
Was
not
that
going
the
to work.
one?
I just want to make sure it's listening on all interfaces. It is. Okay, hopefully the firewall won't interfere. 192.168.1.236. Oh, but now I have to rebuild the container,
Right.
which
Yeah, so
actually
this
is pretty
has
quick.
hard coded, right? Whereas normally, you'd mount the file in the container or something.
Well, so that's actually a funny thing, right? Like neither Docker nor Podman nor any of these OCI runtimes, you actually can't inject files. You can
You can
only
mount it
attach
directly though,
volumes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
So
can mount it
we
directly as
either
well.
need, if we want to make it easy, we should move all config into a folder,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then we could just mount the whole
And then mount it.
folder,
Yeah, exactly.
or we have to like do something funky.
And then that would be like OpenShift compatible because later we could use a config map or something like
Well,
that.
that's the funny thing with Kubernetes. You can attach individual files, like it magically can do it somehow with subpath. Like I don't understand how it does it, but like Podman and Docker can't. So whatever.
Interesting. So is that a
Um,
cryo feature?
I maybe could be. All right. Nope. Why? Ah. Oh, I built it in. Oh, okay. The interesting thing about Bash history is that somehow it's both smart and dumb. And what I mean by that is like there's history from commands that I did in VS Code that are not in the history of this window.
That it
Like
picked up on
I'm sure there's some magic way for like bash history to be super universal, but
I always
whatever.
find that kind of tricky. I use tmux a lot, and I always
I
find
also
the history
kind
is
of use
tricky.
Tmux. Yeah, and like you like exit Tmux history and it loses your history. I don't even know.
Yeah, it's mapped to TTYs or something like pseudo
Yeah.
terminals or something like really low level.
So I don't know how much time that just took. I'm gonna do this again just for giggles.
I think it was pretty quick, right?
Well, so this is cheating because I didn't even change any code. So that was
Right. That's your minimum.
5 seconds, 10 seconds, which is not realistic. But you know, let's do.
Like if you had to pull down the image and stuff for the mono,
So I'm
you're
doing
kind of
no
looking.
cache,
That's right.
which is basically if the image is already there, that's fine. But
Otherwise,
don't
do a
use
real
any
build.
cached container layers. So this is doing the full build, which ends up re-pulling the zip file. I don't know what that weird socket not supported error is. I've been getting that a lot. It doesn't seem to actually have any impact on whether or not the build works or not. Go Tmux. Heck yeah. Definitely hardcore Tmuxers here. Okay. So the whole build of this Godot project into a container took 32 seconds, which is pretty good. Now, granted, this is a very simple, small project with small assets and all this other stuff. So like that build time is going to be more directly correlated to how complex your project is and
Yeah,
not
that's
so
right.
much related to the container itself. But that's built, hard coded with an IP address for my Artemis. So if I run this, there is a good chance that it might work. Finished initializing AMQP connection.
Yep.
Boom.
And you
And then
should
if we look
see.
here, we see that it's connected.
Yep.
So I have now containerized my game server with Godot running on Podman on my local laptop. But as you can see, or as you can't see, there's no UI. Like it is rendering the UI into the ether of nowhere land. So firstly, if I was going to do a server build, I would probably want some flag, like some environment flag or config file flag that says like skip all UI render thinking
Do
generation
all
stuff.
headless.
Yeah, be a headless thing. But for giggles, if I run the game client, we should see the server, the game server should respond to the fact that we are connecting an actual player.
Did you update
So
the
if I
IP
do
there for
this
the
in the
client?
background, what?
The IP that the client is going to use.
No, because the client's connecting to Artemis
All right, that hasn't changed
on
then.
localhost.
Only
It's
the
not
server.
connecting to the server. So that's another. It's a good point though, Roddy. Like with this architecture, I actually don't need to know where the game servers are. I only need to know where my message broker is.
Yep. Which can be consistent.
Say again.
Which can be a consistent endpoint or
Yeah, right. So I
whatever.
could, and even further, if we had lots of different games, because of the way message brokers work, and correct me if I'm wrong, Roddy, like the client and the server are responsible for knowing what the names of like queues and topics and stuff
absolutely.
are. I only actually need one broker. So I could legitimately
you could share
have
the
like,
messaging infrastructure for sure.
say again?
You could share it up to the point of where it becomes a load issue and you need to scale the broker and the messaging layer, right?
Well, exactly. I can scale my message infrastructure to handle the messaging load
and independently
of the game server structure. Right. Now let's be honest, like AMQP is not over UDP today. So there is TCP overhead. So if you're super latency sensitive, this is not really going to work, or there's an upper limit to where it will stop working because of your latency sensitivity. But if you're not super latency sensitive, like one messaging infrastructure could support, hundreds or thousands of games. Like, so if from a big picture perspective, we use this AMQP technology for stuff like, there's a whole system of like train information, like passenger and cargo trains in the United States.
The positive train control.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that is public, but many thousands, if not millions of messages a day, from lots and lots and lots of individual endpoints going to lots of destinations and all that other stuff. Like it's a supremely scalable solution. But anyway, so Cap'n will join, and then what we should see in the server in the background is that a player joined, which it did, added player instance. We're still having our bug here with whatever, but like, hey, that's cool. We at least made some progress.
Yeah, like seeing it containerized, seeing it connect. I mean, I think that's pretty good. I mean, if you compare that, when we left off, we were in a very different place with regards to the tools and languages in use and all that stuff. And now we're back here and we have, well, it's not quite visual, but I mean, it's a small bug. We know that visually it's not far off. Multiple clients connecting to a server that's containerized in a way that uses a builder image and then actually has a slim runtime image that even like you could probably put like in an OpenShift build pipeline later, for example, right?
Yeah, the next step would be well, there's two options. One would be to make it not use a native container build and just figure out some way to use like a Tecton pipeline and have it do sequential build steps, like without an actual container file. Just make each of those container steps here. Actually, I don't know why I'm explaining it when I can just show it. So instead of using a container file, this would be a step in a pipeline where we run this image and then do the same command inside of it. And then we save the output to temporary storage. And then this would be another step in the pipeline where we we would pre-build the image that already has the Linux server in it. And then we would actually just inject this, so like there are ways to simplify this that don't require doing a container build, but then we'd have a nice fancy pipeline. And if we were good enough to if we understood how to do testing with Godot, which I have not even begun to look into, we could run our tests in an automated fashion and then ultimately just automatically deploy the new game server as soon as this was all completed. But I really want to understand why the client's not working. So we get no, so we got to go all the way through the initial thing. Okay. So when the join button gets clicked, oh, that's on its own. It's a different scene. Login screen. Okay, so when the join button is clicked, we execute the join game as player with the value of the text field. So join game as player sends the message, sets the label of the text field, which it does, and then just is done. And so when we get a create message, we're supposed to create a ship and then update the ship. Oh, I think I see what's going on here. So new ship is create ship for UUID. No, yeah, this does create an instance, and here's where it adds it.
But we didn't see that in the node hierarchy earlier, right?
Correct. Nope. Nope. Yeah, it's adding a child to the canvas layer.
So there's definitely something a little weird. I just tried it a couple of times, and on the third try, I can now see my client in the client and on the server.
So hold on,
without any code
it's a child of the canvas layer. So that I actually may have not been looking in the wrong place. So let's do this.
So maybe it is
here's-
randomized outside the area of the screen, even though we didn't see it before.
You know, I bet that is true. Well, but it also doesn't display the sector correctly. But maybe it never did. Are you seeing your ship? You said right
Yeah,
now.
I see the ship at the moment. So the
Does
third
it
time
say
that I
the
tried to
sector,
run
or
it,
does sector still say X?
no, I have X and Y, and my underneath that it says my hex.
No. In the upper right-hand corner.
Oh, it still says sector X. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so I bet it's just not zoomed in correctly. And so the question is how, I just got to figure out how to make it zoom in correctly. But just for giggles, to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So I'm going to play the server. I think I still have the broker running. I do.
Yeah, and so this time when I added, so I originally added player 2, and then I added player 3, and I can see both of their UUIDs on the server, and I can see both of them on my client.
Yeah, I think it's probably just a centering issue.
I think so. I think functionally it works, except for the fact that sometimes we can't see them.
Yeah, so let me do this again. Cap'n, join game. And then if I go into the editor and look at the remote, it's a child of the canvas layer. Here we go, ship things, player ship. So here is 2807, UUID is not public, but what is its position? Yeah, 457 and 293, so it's probably just off screen. So let's look at the server, because the server has code that fixes this. Oh, can we get this in time? Let's see. Server, things related to the debug UI. So it's built into the Zoomy bit. Oh, see, there's a camera that I don't think we have in the game. Yeah, there's a canvas layer and a map overlay, but I don't think there's a camera. I think that's the problem. And I don't know that I can code this fast enough to grab the camera and zoom it by the zoom factor. Yeah, so here's where we make the camera current. I think the issue is just we need a camera to tell it where to render. You still with me, Roddy? I see you moving. I just don't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. I was taking pictures from the.
Would you want to share your screen instead?
No, I just had some funny other behavior happen.
Oh,
So
okay.
while I was taking screenshots, I accidentally hit the key for one of the ships to fire a missile, but on the opposite client, it actually looks like a ship was fired.
That's awesome.
And then I see the ship continuously appearing and shooting. Of course.
Yeah. So that has to do with like stuff that we're drawing. Yeah. So the issue right now with the client, basically, for those who are still paying attention, is that the screen, like where the player ends up on the screen, is actually outside of this box, and we don't have any game camera to focus on
Yeah.
the player. So the issue is basically I need to add a camera to focus on the player. And so if we go to the internet here, Godot, camera, follow player. How to make the camera follow the player in Godot. How to make camera follow player in Godot. Look at all these Stack Overflow. When I add the camera node,
common tooling, right?
the player is stuck in the same place and can no longer move. I don't think that's the problem here. Make sure the camera node is a child of the player and the camera has no scripts. Okay. So if I open, I'm going to quit the editor so I can try to remember how we did this. Because I don't think the server, nope, we want the client. If I look at the scene file for player, does it have the camera? Hit points, position, hex, player, ship, sprite, hitbox. Oh, it does have a camera.
But it may not be in the right place relative to the ships.
Yes, but I think all we may need to do is when we once we have a player that's us, we need to make their camera current. This is the ready. That's not what we care about. Process, join game as player. That's the
Yeah,
sending.
because right now looking directly,
Create
like is
ship
probably
for
perfectly fine.
UUID. Yeah, so check if it's my ship. So that's the issue right now is we don't actually know who we are.
Oh, gotcha.
Right, because the game is storing or was storing
Player name, but then as we switch,
player ship, my ship. Where do we actually set my ship? Why are you doing that? Really?
it doesn't sound like it's anything too complicated.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can just do it here in the next like minute or two. Not found my ship. Yeah, okay. So let's see. So if we go back to the game, so here's, nope, we want the login screen. So this is when we join the game as the player. So if we go back to game, join game as player, sending join with UUID, name to player name. Okay, so this is where we would set the UUID. Because remember, we're using server connection UUID as the UUID, which you will have to figure out how to fix this. So for those of you still watching, don't worry about that. So string my UUID. So here's where we would set. Oh, actually, I don't even know that we need to do that. So where's the create ship for UUID? Got it. Okay. So here's where if UUID update ship with UUID.
So at the moment we're saying it's updated, but it's not created.
No. Hold on. I can't think and talk at the same time. I'm not that smart. So create ship for UUID update. Yeah. Okay. So that's in the game. Create ship for UUID. What UUID is this? It's the UUID of the buffer, which is going to be the player. So here, if UUID equals server connection dot UUID.
2 equals.
Yep. Mistake. Pair programming for the win. I think these have to be in parens in C#. They do. So then let's see, player object, canvas layer, add child, player ship thing instance, camera. Hold on, let me look at the server where we do this. make current player camera equals get node in the player for camera. Okay, so we'll do this. Nope. Ah. Oh. Okay. Okay, so the camera is going to be player ship thing instance get node camera 2D player ship camera 2D. That is a player ship thing. Player ship. Yeah, actually, we don't need to do this because this is already a player ship. And then we will just do the make current. So I think this will do it. So basically what this is saying here, we're going to try it and we'll see. So we already know that the server connection UUID is our player's ID.
Yep.
And then this UUID that's coming in is the UUID that was in the message.
Mm-hmm.
And since we're creating a ship with that player identity, this should be like player UUID or something. We're not very good with our variables. Anyway, so blah, blah, blah. If the UUID of the message equals our UUID, then take whatever the camera is for that player object that we just created and make that the current camera. So fingers crossed, open Godot editor. What am I doing? Yes, okay. So server, run the server. Okay, it's doing its thing. Thinking. Chug. And so some of you might be thinking like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the game client like didn't need a server to be debugged? We'd thought about that, but the reality is that you end up writing a lot of the server logic like into the client just to be able to not have to have a server running to debug. And then like, wouldn't it be cool if you didn't need a broker to debug? But then at that point, like you're writing a bunch of like fake messaging implements. So it's actually like, this is the simplest thing to do is to run a broker and a client and a server, which I know sounds terrible, but like, it's really not that bad.
And resource-wise, it's not actually that intensive starting out. As long, you know what I mean, it's not like there's a lot of players when you're doing this type of cycle for development.
Just for giggles. So Chrome by far is using more resources than Godot. Like,
Way more.
Yeah, so Godot is using 100 megs of memory,
Yeah.
like a gig. Like, I mean, nothing compared to, you know, your browser's using more memory than, you know, than this is. So anyway, all right. So what do we got? We've got the servers running somewhere. Where did its messages go? There we go. Okay, server's running. Here's the client. Fingers crossed, everybody, for all you viewers at home. Nothing.
Oh, no joy. So maybe it's not the camera. Or maybe it's not just the camera.
Yep. Something weird's going on.
But as I said, I didn't make any changes here other than making sure that UUID line was in place. And ran it a few times, and then after like 2 or 3 times, it was working okay. So it can't be anything too major.
Well, so this camera's at 0, but I don't know what that means in relation to the client, but the ship is at -161, 477. So what happens if I do? Nope.
No luck.
No joy. All right.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
One has yet to be found.
But at least it.
Oh, I think we're possibly losing Eric. I also like his RPM, 65,535 RPM. That fan must be really working hard at the moment.
Am I back yet?
You are just back.
Yeah, that was meltdown due to excessive log message
Oh,
generation.
because you had those log message on the update frame.
Update ship with UUID. That is in game. Yeah, don't want to log that every time. Bad.
Bad things will happen.
Huh?
Bad things will happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's probably a stopping point for today. We just got to figure out why the camera's not showing the player, or
And
how
maybe
to
we
get it
can
to.
try to deploy the server and see if we can connect to it next time. From a
Yeah, for
working
sure. Hopefully, we'll actually have a game that like everybody can play. We'll maybe have a client that can be downloaded so that a bunch of us can get on there, do some
maybe
terrible,
even
horrible load testing.
given that it's in
Does it
Godot
matter that the camera
WebAssembly.
is one by one? That is a good question, Mr. Programmer or the programmer. The camera is one by one in the server, but then we set a bunch of zoomy stuff on it. I think we make it current. And then let me actually take a look at that player. Well, the node definition doesn't have anything about size, so
It should be the default.
you could be right. I don't know actually how to figure out. Let's open the editor for the client. I don't know enough about Godot cameras to actually know how to answer your question meaningfully.
Yeah, and when we were doing Podscape, I did, but I've long forgotten.
Scene, open scene. Port scenes, player, camera. Zoom is 1:1, offset 0:0. I'm not sure what you mean by in the UI under X and Y. It showed a spot to change it live. Yeah, I tried changing that. It didn't. Size? I don't see size. I see zoom. I see offset. Anchor mode. Rotating current. Let's try it. I haven't played with Godot, so I could be wrong. Yeah, me either. Let's go here. Camera follow script. Position of the camera equals the player position. Maybe we need to do that. We didn't actually set the player position. It's worth a try.
I would think the player position would be being set, or the player ship position is, right? Because we could see them when it was working here. I could see both clients. I could see both ships in both clients. So the player ship, and I could see them move. So I can only assume
Yeah,
that
but I think you got lucky.
In fact, we could see them within the camera. You mean?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because it wasn't following, right? Like the ship moved and then
No, it
the
was not
camera
following.
didn't.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Where's the make current? Create. Oh, but that doesn't always happen. So let's see, update ship with UUID. Also add this there. If must have joined before us. Or it's just a regular process. We never set my ship. Oh, well then maybe we can do this. All right, I'm actually gonna do slightly different.
And what does make current do?
It makes the camera current.
From a Godot perspective, the current flag.
Oh, sorry. C# versus GDScript. Makes this camera the current camera for the viewport. If the camera node is outside the scene tree, it will attempt to become current once it's added. Viewport creates a different view or subview. Children 2D nodes will display on it. Children camera 3D, blah blah. I don't think we have to worry necessarily about that.
So I don't know if that's necessarily doing what we need in that case, right? Maybe we need to be.
Well, if there was no current camera, because like once you end up with multiple players, like if you had another player join, you don't want that camera to like take over. So the make current is probably important, but
it may not be
we probably also need to set the camera location.
Yeah.
But it's weird because I don't do that in the server, right? And it's and he just copied the same code. So on every process frame, we look at the text field and say if the text field has if the text field's value is in the player objects, then find its camera and then make that camera the current camera.
Right, and looking at the scene graph in Godot, the camera was a child of the player ship, right? Is
Correct.
that what I saw? Yeah. Yes. So you're right then. In that case, then it shouldn't need to be done manually because the traversal of the scene tree should update the nodes in such a way that the camera is a child of the player ship, which makes that a parent-child relationship and they're attached.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this again for giggles now that I don't have this broken log message stuff. I also want to make sure that it's actually working right. So here we go. So here's the server. Client will come up any moment. Oh, client's already up. So this is the client. Here's our log messages. So Cap'n in the game. Aha. Okay, so map canvas layer, ship things. Okay, so I just have, it's code error.
So when you remove player ship / camera 2D.
I thought I didn't need it because it already was that, but apparently it was not. Ship things, player ship, camera 2D. Okay, so I still need
to be specific in there.
Well, I thought this was already. Oh, it is a ship thing. My bad. Yeah, so it's a player ship.
That one right there.
Ship thing. Yeah, so this still needs to be player ship.
Ship / camera 2D, even though you're calling it on the player ship thing instance.
Well, I thought I was calling it on the player ship. This is actually the ship thing.
Oh, I see.
The ship thing. So this has to do with I have this.
It has to do with the node hierarchy.
So the ship thing is a node which has this stat node, which is all of the labels, and then it has the actual kinematic body object, which has the sprite, the hitbox,
and the camera,
and then some transformy bit, which I don't remember why that's there. I think it has to do with clamping or the camera, and then the actual camera object. So it's funny, I just didn't see this error message previously. So let's stop the client and stop the server. Oh man, if this works in the last like 5 minutes of the stream, that'll be funny. So let's restart the server so that it again, because we don't have an easy way to delete players. That should be a. If only we had people who wanted to help us with this, that want to write
That'd
code.
be great.
They
We
could
can
write
put that little
the
green X back
tools.
in.
Okay, here's the client. So I fixed that with the player ship. So let's play in editor. Okay, that's doing its thing. All right, there's the server. Here's the client. There's the client in the background. Cap'n, join game. Boom.
Oh, look at that.
Still not centered correctly, but
No, but it's
better.
in the right place and we can see it. And we can see that we
Well,
can move.
yeah, so we need to center the camera. Fired a ship.
Yeah, I wonder, could you run up another client?
Oh, no, not easily.
Because you need to open up a new Godot instance and a new instance of the same project.
Well, here, so if you really want to, yes, here's what we can do. Let me expose.
Server player in.
Hold on, let me expose it with ngrok. All right, so Roddy, do you see this?
I do, yeah.
Can you read that? So that in your client, you need to set that as your.
Yep. Let me try.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire up my server, which I can do fine with localhost. I got that for you again, Roddy.
Hang on just 1 second. I'm just about to put it in here. Shoot. I just switched over from Linux back to the Mac, and my automatic key combinations are now all wrong.
Oh no.
2.tcp.ngrok.io.
Correct.
12.856. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
12.856. 12.856. All right, so let's see what happens when I save. All right. And go back to my client.
Yes, you don't need to run a server. You just need to run.
That's right.
Client.
Just the client. Let's see what happens. Yep. Something between me and you. It says sending join with UUID, but I do see that you don't see my UUID.
No, I don't see a connection.
No, and I see that it's connecting to the wrong place. So there's something I did wrong here locally. Let me see if I can find the right window once again.
Yeah, I don't see any connections from you. Did you edit the server config or the client config?
The server connection.cs in the SRT project. Let me do it by the command line here. Let's close down the server.
In the Godot client, but you need to be running the client, not the server.
I was indeed running the client.
Okay, so you edited client.cfg in resources?
No, I edited the connection in the actual file, which gets overridden by the client configuration file. There's a default value that gets put in there.
In server connection.cs?
Yeah. And that gets
it gets overwritten by the config file.
That's right, which is what I'm updating here now.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. Yeah, in the absence of a config file, that would have worked.
Yes.
Oh, 20 seconds, Roddy.
2.tcp.ngrok.io.
12856.
All right, 12856. Let's see what happens. And Oh, still connecting to the same thing.
What?
Yes, I don't know why. And the client config is not visible inside the Godot. And I'm sure I edited resources.clientconfig, and it has the right server string.
Do you want to share your screen?
Nope, but I am gonna update this manually again here. 2.tcp.ngrok. There was some changes I was making earlier when I was doing some testing because I had some issues earlier. Let's see here. Oh, I see the problem. Silly me.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
was SSH'd into my Linux workstation, and when I edited it, it was on the Linux workstation.
Got it.
Let me try it locally. Too many machines.
Too many. Yeah. Too many servers.
Yes, indeed, that's the whole problem. 2.tcp.ngrok. Oh, 12.856. And we'll try it right out of the gate here again. If my window would stay up.
Will he connect? Wait. Oh, open. One connection.
That's good, that's me. There's 6.
Oh, a player.
And of course, I don't see it on my side, but you see me, but I don't.
Oh,
So,
yeah, because you didn't edit you don't have your code changed.
nope.
You
But
don't
hey,
have your
it worked great.
camera.
It worked fine.
Yeah. So
All I
let
had to
me
do was
play an editor. Hang on. I don't know that I'll see you. So for those who are still watching, Roddy is connected over the internet to my message broker running on my laptop. He's in the game. So this is Roddy's player in the game. I'm gonna now join the game.
Oh, came the wrong way
And
here.
now I don't see myself.
I did
Somehow
change
the
the
camera
room.
make current thing didn't work right. But we're both in the game.
Yeah, and there's me turning around. Even though I
There's
think there's
me.
something weirdly reversed in some way. Because when I push forward, I go backward.
Really? I pushed forward and I went forward.
Let me turn. So let me try to go toward you. Oh yeah, I am good. Well, I'm following you, so that's good. A little bit of synchronized flying here.
Oh, I think we're at the edge of the play area.
Oh, so we're stopped. Oh, we should be okay
Maybe.
now.
I can't seem to get away from you though. Oh, there we go. Now I'm getting
But
further away.
now, yeah, I slowed down. And now I'm running away.
Where's my? I'm trying to find. So hold on. I'm gonna slow down. If I can get to like 0.0. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 5, 5. Okay, I'm trying to get to 0.0 so that maybe I'll appear.
Oh,
Ah,
did I
no,
hit you? Oh,
cheater! You did hit me.
oh, it's good to see that that worked at least, right? Like I fired from my client here, and the missile was shot, and it hit you, and it disappeared.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
like, that's good,
yeah. But
relatively
somehow
speaking, right?
I'm 260, 270. All right, I'm trying to get myself onto my screen. Oh,
Oh,
there I
hey,
am.
look, there
Look,
you are. Look
ah,
at that.
I found myself. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna go to the camera thing in the
Oh, that's excellent.
editor. Remote.
Hey, look, I see you on my screen now.
Yeah. Where's the player ship? Camera 2D. I don't know whose camera this is because there's three players. So I
And
think
two
we
of
got
mine.
some stale stuff going on.
Yeah, probably from the one we didn't see earlier that I quit and rejoined from player 5.
Oh, could be. Could be.
So I mean, ultimately, like the idea here works and works okay using Godot as the server and
Yeah.
as the client with a messaging bus using protocol buffers in between, right? And like all the
Yeah.
debug logging that comes up in Godot also works, and it led us to see the camera not being set quite right earlier on the player ship, and we're able to inspect. Like this is all things we've gotten by moving to Godot. We can go and visually inspect the node
Oh,
crate.
just having
You
the
know what I mean?
tools and the editor and everything is
It's
like
a
so
huge leg
worth
up,
it.
right?
Yeah. And we're using a game engine which is not explicitly designed to be a server as a server.
Right.
Like
That's right.
that's pretty
Exactly.
awesome. All right, folks. Well, thanks for watching today. Roddy and I had some fun, and we got some
Absolutely.
things working. We got some bugs to file and fix with the camera stuff. But yeah, man, this is rad.
This is great. Good
I think,
restart, I
and
think.
yeah, cool beans. All right, I will. Let's see where the captions, graphics. Is there a ending video? Well, there's a Ask the OpenShift admin outro video that I could play, but there's no like stream ended video. So, stream
We're,
ending. Okay, I'm gonna go with stream ending. We'll see
all
what
right.
happens.
See everyone. Thanks for coming.
Cheers. Bye.